It's on. You can stop the duopoly from turning the election into a charade. Also, Albanese knows the truth about the Syria genocide, and Kiwis say to Aussies, chill bro, it's just a ship. Coming up on this week's Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report. It's the 3rd of March 2025. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined today by Citizens Party's Senate candidate for Victoria, Sleiman Yohanna. Welcome, Sleiman.
Thank you, Robbie.
In this week's show, we're going to give you a big rundown on what the Citizens Party is going to do in the election and why we are the most qualified party to actually get elected. And you can help make that happen because the news media certainly is not. And then we're going to do some updates on the Syria front, but also this ridiculous story about the Chinese research ship. And I'm going to tell you why, as Australians, you should feel embarrassed the way the media and commentators here carry on, especially compared to our Kiwi cousins that are pretty laid back about it all. Yeah. Before we begin, remember, this is not commentary, this is activism. We're trying to change the world we're talking about with this kind of information, and you can help. So, and that's by boosting the show. Like the show, share it widely as wide as you can. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Remember to ring the bell icon. Comment below. We value the feedback and I try to engage as much as possible as time allows. But that also helps the algorithm, but it's great feedback from our supporters, so we really appreciate that. And any questions that you might have from what's been raised in the show. And also there's a donate button below. Please help now more than ever because the campaign is on, and I can tell you, as someone who's involved in it and stressing every day, it's incredibly expensive. And we're proudly not Clive Palmer's party, but that means our model of only being funded by the people of Australia is very important, and you can be one of those people to help in that regard. Let's get into it. It's on. You can stop the duopoly from turning the election into a charade. So the Citizens Party is going very big in this election, and we need your help. Now, I'm going to mention something that we'll talk about a bit later, but I won't mention it here now. Mark this down in your diaries. On the 22nd of April, we are holding a very big launch and fundraising event in Sydney at the Hilton Hotel on the 22nd of April. And we invite everybody to come. Now, I know for a lot of people that won't be possible, but if you're in Sydney, if you're in New South Wales especially, or even if you're interstate and you want to come, we have a whole package of information there about how you can participate in this event. And I'll talk about that a bit more later on. Now, regular viewers of the show will realise it's a bit strange because you're used to seeing me, but you're not used to seeing Sleiman. And the reason we're here is we're your candidates for Victoria. I'm the lead Senate candidate, and Sleiman is number 2 on the ticket with me. So we're the Senate candidates for the Citizens Party in Victoria. And Sleiman, just introduce yourself to the viewer. Tell them a bit about yourself.
Sleiman Yohanna originally came from Iraq, fleeing the war. I arrived in Australia in 1992, came as a single, and started like any new arrival here to learn a bit of more English, and I'd done a course in electronic afterward, and then got married here. It was heartbreaking to flee your original country because this is your history, this is your everything. Yeah. But I saw the destruction of the nation through a lot of lies about, everyone knows about Iraq, the invasion of Iraq afterward based on weapon of mass destruction. But I fled. This is after the Gulf War, and we had 8 years of Iran-Iraq. That it was all set up by the forces which they wanted to destroy that part of the world. And coming here, then after a few years, of course, I knew Citizens Electoral Council through my neighbour.
That's what we were called in those days?
Yep, and I was politically aware, but I didn't understood anything about Australian real history and the Western history. So I got into it and became a supporter. Then I joined full-time in 2002. And the reason I joined, of course, for any new arrival as immigrant, your focus is going to be on establishing your life. That is normal. Yep. But because of my background, I saw when the nation collapsed as a system, there's no individual solution going to work. And I've seen that. Iraq used to be very rich. One income was enough to support a family, a free health care and education system, and standard of living was very good. But I saw when I was studying here and living here for first few years, and I saw the system here is totally controlled, and it's becoming worse every year. It didn't become better because it's supposed to be, like we've seen Labor, Liberal promising, and I felt that it's all empty promises. And then I decided to join full-time, and of course some of my family members didn't want me to do so. They said, why are you doing it? You're just immigrant, build a house, establish yourself. I said, well, I'm not going to keep running. I saw what happened in Iraq. This is a different type of warfare here. It's economic warfare, enslaving everyone for a bit of mortgage and no job security. When you think about Australia, richest country on the planet Earth, a yep. continent, and is 28 million people, this is for me is a big question mark, and this is why I joined this fight.
And I would hope the viewer who's just watched your explanation, Sleiman, readily acknowledges, as I can attest, that you are a true patriot of Australia. This is your adopted country. As you said, you didn't choose to leave your home country, but circumstances forced you out. This is now your adopted country. You've taken responsibility for this country. Part of my story is when I first moved to Melbourne to join our party, the very first day here, 32 years ago, I met Sleiman in our office on the very first day. He was just happy to be visiting the office. Couldn't speak much English then, and he's come a long way. But that's what the Citizens Party is. I mean, Sleiman, you speak about 4 or 5 languages.
Yes.
You've had an enormous amount of experience in the Middle East and in Australia. Sleiman is someone who works more we have a phone team operation in our office that keeps in touch with our supporters and talks to new supporters and builds the grassroots support for the party. Sleiman's very much involved in that operation rather than the stuff in front of camera. But he's eminently qualified to be an excellent candidate for the Citizens Party, and so that's why he's second on the ticket to myself for this election. And then the things I'm about to go through, Sleiman's been there the whole way in these fights with us to try and achieve these things which are for the good of all Australians. I want to make a comment, and sometimes if you knew me, you would know that I'm not prone to boastfulness. And so this is not a boast. This is a statement of fact. And it's a statement of fact born from my personal experience as the guy who most represents the party in Canberra, talking to politicians. And I've met them all, essentially. This is my statement of fact. The Citizens Party is running the most serious, qualified candidates in Australia. If you're not familiar with the candidates, please look at them. I don't have time to mention all of them today, but we're running Senate teams in every state and in the Northern Territory. The only place that's missed out is the ACT. We thought we had a candidate there, but he turned out to be a POM or had British citizenship rights, and it was too late for that to be cleared. But nothing personal to Canberra public servants, but they probably weren't going to vote for us anyway. Anyway, so that's a bit disappointing. But so every state's covered though. Any state in Australia, you can vote for the Citizens Party in the Senate, and look out for those candidates because the Senate campaigns are quite strategic. What's going to happen in the Senate is the balance won't change, but some of the composition will. So there will be a coalition side, there will be a Labor side. Neither will have power. They won't have the majority of votes. There will be a crossbench. And when you think about the Citizens Party, think about is this the kind of party we want in the crossbench? Because there's lots of different people in the crossbench. I know them all. You know, some leave a lot to be desired. Some make a really valuable contribution. But with what I'm about to go through, ask yourself, isn't this the kind of experience and commitment and vision that we need in that crossbench, which has real leverage between the two major parties? All legislation has to be negotiated through it that we want there. All right, so let's just go through the Citizens Party's record. I'll put my glasses on for this. Essentially, you can highlight two big things that the Citizens Party has focused on. One is we put them under the categories of economic sovereignty and national sovereignty. And economic sovereignty means who's running Australia's economy and are they accountable to the people? And national sovereignty means who's running Australia, full stop, right? Is it the Australian people or is it foreign powers, and are they accountable to the people? And right now the answer to both those questions is no, and that's what we want to change. So in terms of national sovereignty, we want, and our policy is for an independent foreign policy. That will allow us to be a truly sovereign country and participate in the on the world stage in a different way than we have until now, such as making sovereign decisions not to go and join the kind of wars that destroyed Sleiman's home country, right? That sort of thing. And not be sucked into the next one, which they want us to the worst of all, which would be against China if some of those idiots can get their way. On economic sovereignty, the powers that run our economy are not accountable to the people because it's the banks, it's the private banks. And so our whole focus as a party, for the whole time I've been in this party, has been smash the power of the banks. You need banks. You could think of it as a necessary evil. They should not be the power they are over this economy. And so our record is very focused on that fight against banks and corporate power. And I'll just go through it. Look at what we've done. We fought the privatisation of the Commonwealth Bank and all the privatisations that happened in the 90s, actually. We fought them really hard. Because what it did was, by privatising the Commonwealth Bank, the government took itself out of banking entirely and created a private banking monopoly. So 100% of Australian banking now is private. It's a monopoly of private banking, and that means the government is operating with its hands tied behind its back, and these banks have had a field day at the expense of the people.
And I just want to add something there, Robbie. In Iraq, we used to have a national bank, like we used to have here, the Commonwealth Bank. And I remember growing up there, infrastructure projects were everywhere.
Yeah.
We had even one stage 2 million Egyptian just working there, single man, because we needed a lot of labor. There was like what China is doing today, exactly the same thing. And you know, in Australia, you know, what you were talking about, who's in charge, just look at how many Senate inquiries we had in the last, say, 15 years. There were many of them. And all their recommendations were good. Look at Royal Commission inquiry into the banks in 2018. If that is not a big wake-up call for people, well, there's something wrong, big wrong here in this nation. Okay, all these recommendations, nothing happened. And the government promised we're going to implement them. It didn't happen. And even now we've seen nearly 40% of people are they're not voting for Labor and Liberal. And these people, Labor, Liberal, they know why people are upset. So who's in charge? When Labor, Liberal, what they did in the last 40 years is exactly the same. There's no different because there's a private money system in charge. You need your public bank or Commonwealth Bank to go back to your sovereignty.
And as you know, because Sleiman's privy to what I know, the Citizens Party's had discussions with Labor and with Liberal about our policy of a public bank, and privately, they're all for it, but they don't do anything because they are not in charge and they're not capable of breaking out. And that's why you're going to need the Citizens Party in there. We'll just go through the list of things that we've done since we fought the privatisation of the Commonwealth Bank. One of the things, there was a big shift for our party in 2008, because before 2008 we had actually run two very large election campaigns in 2004 and 2007. And in both of those years, we had the second biggest slate of candidates of any party in Australia. It was they were very big campaigns we did. But when 2008 happened, the global financial crisis hit. And from that time, the Citizens Party felt that we had to operate differently because we couldn't just wait for elections to intervene in politics. We had to intervene in the policy debate. So we went into these very high-powered policy debates to try and get solutions implemented that would protect the people of Australia. The first one was called Glass-Steagall, where we wanted to get the Australian banks separated so that banks with deposits would not be allowed to have anything to do with any kind of speculation that put those deposits at risk, because that is what had caused the global financial crisis. Glass-Steagall was an American law that had been in place from 1933 to 1999. It kept the American banking system stable and protected. Once they repealed it in 1999, it only took 8 years to blow the world up, literally blow the world up, because speculation just exploded because they were gambling with the depositors' money, which previously they hadn't been allowed to do. So we took up the fight. There was a big global push to return to it. We led the fight here in Australia. And in 2018 and 2019, we got a bill introduced twice for a Glass-Steagall separation of banks, but the major parties blocked it, right? That was Glass-Steagall. Then we went into the fight on bail-in, because bail-in was the opposite of Glass-Steagall. The global banking powers that be, they had a choice. The people like the Bank for International Settlements and the big central banks, etc., their choice was go back to Glass-Steagall and force the banks to become safer by behaving and not doing the things that made them risky, or keep allowing them to do the things that are risky, but put the people on the hook for their losses. And that's what Glass-Steagall, that's what bail-in was. From the bail-in policy said when a bank fails, you can steal the customer's deposits to prop it up so that doesn't trigger a chain reaction failure of banks. It was an evil, evil policy, and the Citizens Party led the fight against that here. We tried to expose when there was a law put up in 2017 and then rammed through on Valentine's Day in 2018. A lot of people, we draw a lot of attention to that. And then in 2020, we wrote the bill that was introduced to amend that law that allowed for a bail-in. And that got introduced in the Senate, but again, it was blocked because the two major parties blocked it, again, on behalf of the banks. Now, in the middle of all this as well, something else that we did was we uniquely, as a party, fought against the war talk about China. Suddenly, the same people that gave us the Iraq war, the same people that gave us the lies of Syria and Libya, and we'll go through our Syria updates in a minute.
And Ukraine.
The same people turn around and they're saying to Australia, hey, you're under threat from China. When we're thinking, China, our biggest and best trading partner, that's making us all this money, you're saying it's a threat. And the Americans who are saying this are saying, let us have a massive military build-up in your country, and they've effectively taken over our country using this scare campaign, and every single party fell for it. The Liberals, the Labor Party, all of them fell for it except the Citizens Party. And if you're a long-term viewer of this show, you would have seen that we were the ones saying, this is nuts, this is wrong, these people are liars, they're lying to you. If these kind of things can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and if this leads to a war, this will be the war to end all wars. Total annihilation of this country. This is insane. And for a long time there, we were a lone voice, and probably I personally felt that way, that we were a lone voice probably until Paul Keating came out in 2023 and started and said very publicly a lot of what we'd been saying. And then the tone started to change a bit.
Well, something, Robbie, I want to mention here to viewers. It's been like 30 years, just recent history of lies and wars. Iraq, Iran-Iraq, then invasion of Iraq, then Libya, then Syria. And if people think about Libya or Syria or Iraq, if you go back 30 years ago, there was no immigration from those nations to anywhere because they had a good country, but they were targeted because they did not submit to the IMF policy or globalist policy, and they destroyed them. And where was it international law? There's no weapon of mass destruction. So now the same forces are pushing, as they did to Ukraine. 1 million young men is being killed for nothing, for total lies. Now they want to do it with your biggest trading partner, with China. So if people believe this narrative coming from, I don't call them media, they are the tool of keep you in dark, as they did with us for 37 years, or attacking you if you are a threat. That's what they're doing. People got to wake up, take your responsibility, because your nation, your family is under attack. This is economic warfare. They're going to destroy us, all of us.
And unlike me or anyone I know, Sleiman has been through a war and, as he said, the destruction of his country. And I take everything he says on this subject incredibly seriously. Let's move on. So in 2019, we, the Citizens Party, were very much leaders of the fight to stop the cash ban. When Scott Morrison tried to ban cash transactions over $10,000, the Liberal Party policy was to send you to jail for spending your own money. We worked with John Adams and Martin North, who are independent commentators and who helped lead the fight on that as well. And that was us forcing them to completely drop a bill, right? We forced it to an inquiry, we forced it to completely drop a bill. And we did that because what we saw with the cash ban was not just because we have a sentimental connection to cash, but because we saw that this was giving more power to the banks, right? The less you spend with cash and the more you spend digitally, the more power the banks have over you. And the banks want 100% of that power, right? And that's why we took that up. And that's a law we defeated. We defeated that.
But Robbie, on that, we defeated the law, but they came another way by deprivation, we call it, shutting down branches, ATM machine, pushing cashless. So if an essential service is not being provided by the banks, well, the government got to intervene and bring a public bank.
Exactly.
The most popular policy today, if any one of them want to win, why are they not pushing that? So who's in charge again of your political system?
No, exactly. We stopped the government from getting rid of cash. The government then just sat back while the private banks have gone and done it. But we didn't give up on that either. But anyway, let's move on. One of the things that we did that was quite spectacular and very unique was in 2020, we were the only party to question what had been done to Christine Holgate when Scott Morrison removed her from Australia Post. And the reason we questioned it is because I was watching it that day and I saw this extraordinary performance of Scott Morrison in the Parliament saying, she can go.
She must go.
And I didn't even know, I didn't know the woman or anything, but I knew one thing about her. I'd never heard of her until a month or so earlier, but a month or so earlier, Bob Katter's office said to me, Robbie, Bob Katter met Christine Holgate, and I said, who's that? I was CEO of Australia Post, to talk about a postal bank. She supports a postal bank. And a month later, when I saw that performance, I'm thinking, hang on, here's Scott Morrison, the biggest banker's boy that's ever been in the Australian Parliament. There's been no bigger banker sued than Scott Morrison. And he's doing this to someone. The only thing I know about her is she supports a bank that the private banks will hate, absolutely hate. So we started asking questions. We started working with the Licensed Post Office Group, which represents the small business people who run post offices as small businesses. It's about 2/3 of all post offices. And they were her biggest fans. They called her the greatest CEO Australia Post ever had. No one else was paying attention. We did. We got that message out. We turned around public opinion. We forced it to a Senate inquiry, which cleared her name. And we were hoping to get her reinstated, but that was a bridge too far. But it did clear her name. And what it also did was turbocharge our campaign for the postal bank. And we'll talk about that more in a second. Then we took up the fight for Sterling First victims and financial victims generally. And the Sterling First victims were the elderly people in WA, about a bit over 100 of them, who had lost everything in this Rent for Life scheme that ASIC and the WA state government both knew was dodgy. And not only did they do nothing about it, they actually assisted the scheme to get up and going even after the red flags were raised. So we took up that cause. We pushed that to a Senate inquiry that was conducted into the failure and into ASIC's failures. And we took up the cause of compensation. And this is a general point to all financial victims. We firmly believe that you've had, in this era of total private banking, we unleashed the banks. They turned into predatory monsters, completely unprecedented in Australian history, because for the century before that, we always had public banks that kept them in check. But for this period, you've got this massive human toll of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of households that have been destroyed by the banks, and only a fraction of them have had any restitution. And it's not good enough to have something like the Banking Royal Commission and say, oh, you know, here are the rules we'll play by going forward. we'll draw a line on it and go forward and not look back. No. You must have restitution for those people. And even if it takes 10 years of bank profits to compensate them, they must be compensated. This is completely unjust otherwise. And the Citizens Party is the main voice for that kind of compensation. Whereas Australia is one of the worst countries in the world for actually wanting to compensate anybody for anything. Unless, of course, you're a Liberal Party staffer who gets herself into trouble and becomes a political inconvenience, and then bang, the government will come up with $2 million to compensate you like that, right? But if you're a little old person who's about to lose your home at the end of your life for something that you did, that nothing you did wrong, and only $18 million will save all 100 victims of Sterling First, for some reason the government can't pony that up, even though they promised they would. So we have become the voice on that policy. After that, we helped John Adams, the independent economist, achieve the inquiry into ASIC, which became a very big inquiry. And Professor Andy Schmulow, our Senate candidate for New South Wales, independently played a big role in that. And that ended up calling for the abolition and replacement of ASIC with a proper regulator and a law enforcement body. We took up the fight against bank branch closures, which we were talking about, which is the ongoing fight about saving cash. And that we forced to probably one of the biggest Senate inquiries that have been conducted for years. And regular viewers will know that the Citizens Party drove the whole thing. We attended and participated in all 13 hearings, entirely funded by the Citizens Party supporters, not by the taxpayer. Even the politicians were commenting on that at the end, right? We were turning up everywhere, including in Tom Price in WA, all entirely funded by ourselves.
And Robbie, I want to mention, because of my work in the organisation, I do a lot of travelling in regional Australia and meeting our good supporters there. And I've seen towns after towns after towns is becoming like a ghost towns, actually. Because there's no bank branch left. A lot of post offices are being forced to shut down because all the customers of Big Four, they go to the post office, they're not being funded properly. For me, this is a national security issue because this is your food production. This is regional. If we lost it, we have no food security in this nation. And from history, you know, when our soldiers, over 200,000 people after Second World War came back, our great Prime Minister John Curtin, he said, what are we going to do with them? All of them coming back, they need a job, they need to establish a family. Through the old Commonwealth Bank, we created a miracle here, become a lucky country. One income was enough to support a family. So this is not a strange idea to talk about it. And if you don't have a public bank, forget it. You don't have a government. Because it's usury, it's feudal system, it's been throughout history. You need to go back to credit system.
Well, what you've just said is a paraphrase of what John Curtin himself said. If the government doesn't have the reins of credit in its hands, it cannot govern except in a secondary degree. In other words, someone else is in charge. And that's what we mean by economic sovereignty.
And this is why we've been our policy from day one, a public bank.
Yes. I've got a couple more things on the list just because I wanted to make this comprehensive. Last year, we, the Citizens Party, stopped Jim Chalmers from legislating away the principle of democratic authority over the Reserve Bank, which John Curtin and Ben Chifley established back in the 40s. We stopped that. We worked with people in the Greens Party to actually stop it. But we pushed it to a Senate inquiry. That's the inquiry that when we told people to call Parliament and get an inquiry. That's when some staffer said to another staffer who relayed it to me, there's no one like the Citizens Party to melt the phones down. Right? That was that inquiry. And we stopped it. And you know, people in Parliament know this about us, what we're actually capable of. The other thing last year that we don't take all credit for this, but we played a very big role in stopping the MAD bill, the mis and disinformation bill. And then, of course, the big campaign that Sleiman's referred to quite a few times is the public bank, right? The Post Office People's Bank. And that has become a theme for the last 5 years around Australia. Everyone's been hearing about this. And like I said, I can't tell you about the conversations I've had with the two major parties. They're full of people who want to do it. Last August, there was a headline, Post Office Bank back on Labor's agenda. Yet nothing, crickets. Why? Because they're not in charge, as Sleiman's saying. Now, I'm going to make another bold statement. And again, this is not a boast. This is my experience talking. You're going to have to take my word for it. Given that they're saying Everyone's saying this is a cost of living election. Andy Schmulow, Dr. Andy Schmulow, the Citizens Party's Senate candidate for New South Wales, is the single most qualified candidate in Australia. And if you don't know that, start watching what he says on the interviews that he's done. And we're going to play a clip in a minute. But while we were participating in Senate inquiries, so was he. And he's been this massive driving force for Senate inquiries. He drove the inquiry into what they call the financial accountability regime, which was to introduce $1 million fines for bankers who are paid millions of dollars if they are directly implicated in the crimes of banks. Instead of just the shareholder paying the fine, the crook should pay the fine, right? And that was agreed to by the Labor government in November 2022, finally, after Andy participated in a Senate inquiry into it. And then the next day, after Labor agreed to it, the next day Labor backflipped because it took a call from Anna Bligh and the Banking Association said, you will not do that, right? And she showed what a crook she was. She said, if you have a law that says bankers who are criminals will get fined personally, we will not be able to recruit bankers. I.e., we want criminals. And it's that blatant. The corruption is that blatant. And Andy Schmulow knows it better than anybody. And if he was in the Senate, he would, as he said, he will not stop beating them with a stick, right? With a very well-informed stick. So he did that one. He drove the inquiry into PricewaterhouseCoopers and the other consultants who have just rigged our economy. They are the auditors who've audited all the big companies, but they're not audited themselves. They help all the big companies dodge tax, all the multinationals dodge tax, because they get positions with the government helping to write the tax laws. Total conflicts of interest, and this eventually blew up in the last couple of years with PwC. Andy drove that. Andy participated in the bank closures inquiry, which is how we came to start working with him, and he made an amazing contribution to that. He participated in the supermarket prices inquiry, which is now all in the news because the ACCC has confirmed that Coles and Woolies are the most profitable supermarkets in the world, right? While you can't afford your groceries. He participated in the ASIC regulation inquiry, and that's his actual particular area of expertise. And he's in these inquiries, Andy's so powerful, all his recommendations get adopted. And so now, but he shares the frustration that you expressed before of, you have the inquiry, you have the recommendations, but nothing happens. Yeah. And that's why, Andy started talking to me and the Citizens Party saying, how do we get in there and make sure it happens? Because you can't rely on the people in there, right? And that's the potential for this election if people actually see what we've done and decide to support us.
And I want to mention something here. Okay, what you said, what we achieved, of course, your work, especially with, a lot of politicians out there, educating them. And there's a lot of good people, like in different political parties. There are a lot of them that is not happy, but they become a hostage for the party machine. Yeah. That is what we're saying. Some people, they told us before, I'm not going to vote. I like your guys, but I'm not going to vote for you because it's a waste of vote. Well, no, when you vote for others outside of these people are going to say why people are voting for Citizens Party. And what we achieved in the last whatever years, it did not come out of blue or a magic. It came 37 years of doing the work. And I want to say to every viewer here, when I meet people from my community or other community or our supporters, and people, sometimes new people, they say, how come we haven't heard about your guys for 37 years? I said, well, that is the question you ask yourself, because if you knew about Citizens Party, you would have known in 2008 about global financial crisis, why it was coming, about bail-in. If some people doesn't know bail-in, well, go back to Cyprus and Greece in 2009 when every bank account was frozen and some people lost 40% of their life saving. Imagine you lose whatever you've been working for. So this is why the media is not in the business media. They are part of, establishment, keeping people in dark. And this is why I say there's no something called democracy or freedom of press here.
I want to play a quick clip now from Andy Schmulow. As a candidate, Andy, I think he's in his mid-50s now, so Andy's not the most technologically literate person in the world, and that's one of the reasons I like him, because neither am I. Probably a little bit more than he is, though. But we got him onto TikTok, because
Yeah.
that's, you got to use social media as anyway. So we're going to play a quick TikTok from Andy because lately he's been able to stick to this theme of the cost of living. So have a quick look.
Cost of living crisis. A week ago, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission issued a report in which they found that Coles and Woolworths are the most profitable supermarkets in the world. They found that Coles and Woolworths have a crushing degree of market concentration. They're a duopoly. So our Prime Minister has said if he gets re-elected, after the election, he'll work on fixing the problem. Why after the election? He's been in office for 3 years. What has he been doing about it for the last 3 years, and why can't he do something about the problem right now? He's still Prime Minister. And what has he said he'll do? He said he'll punish Coles and Woolworths for price gouging. Well, I'm an associate professor in a law school, at the law school at the University of Wollongong, and I know exactly where the holes are in our law and what we need to do to fix our laws, and I can tell you, technically speaking, Coles and Woolworths haven't broken the law by putting their prices up. So what are you going to punish them for? The solution isn't punishing them for price gouging. The solution is to say, if these guys are a duopoly, break them up. The United States government broke up an oil monopoly company called Standard Oil in 1911, 114 years ago. There are anti-monopoly powers in Canada, the United Kingdom, and throughout the European Union. Why don't we have one? And I'll tell you why. Nobody wants to touch these companies because they're the biggest party political donors in the country. They have bought and sold our politicians. Corporate donations to the two major political parties is $260 million for the last 10 years. That's why Albanese doesn't want to do anything about it. That's why Dutton won't do anything about it. And the electorate has started to realise that two major parties don't have your interests at heart. They serve the interests of their political donors. My name is Associate Professor Andy Schmulow. If you live in New South Wales, send me to the Senate. I will create absolute mayhem for these monopolies. I'm not scared of them, and I'm lusting to take them on.
And that's the guy that I'm telling you is the single most qualified candidate for public office in Australia of all parties.
Yep.
Now, the Citizens Party, given that, we are going bigger than we ever have before for this election. We're spending an enormous amount of money in different ways of trying to promote our candidates, especially candidates like Andy. We've got high-powered Senate teams for all the states. We've got 3 dominant teams in New South Wales with Andy, Victoria with Sleiman and I, and Western Australia with Aisha Novakovic and Rex Riles. So we're pulling out all the stops. We need your help. What your role in this is crucial. And it's crucial in a couple of ways. One is, it's just a word of mouth question, right? Get the message out there, because we the phenomenon of this election is, why haven't we, who is the Citizens Party? How come we haven't heard of you before? So you see, get on, Andy Schmulow's social media and share it widely, right? So that people, he will keep hammering these themes for this election campaign. You can help. Second one is, explain to people the power of their vote. And what I said at the beginning, that a Senate vote is strategic, right? If the Citizens Party can get in that balance of power position in the Senate, our track record shows you how we would use it. We're not there to do stunts. We're there to change the country. We're there to improve people's lives. That's what we can do if we get into that balance of power position. And that requires people to vote for us. And then the other ways is just, volunteer, participate. Get in. There's a section on our website where you can actually become a volunteer and do those things. You might be able to hand out our information at a pre-polling booth or at a polling booth, etc. Because we're running Senate campaigns, it's not we've got some high-powered House campaigns in different parts of the country, but they're sort of more scattered around. So you might be able to do some things, put up a call flute in your sign in your yard or whatever. Look at that volunteer section and see how you can actually volunteer. You might be able to hold a meeting. If you're in New South Wales, you might be able to organise a meeting for Andy Schmulow in your area, right? That sort of thing. And
I want to mention something about Andy. Andy is a professor of law in Wollongong.
Yeah.
As he mentioned with your interview, he said, I've got a good job. I'm not doing this because I need a bit of money. But anyone joins Citizens Party, he might lose a lot because you're going against the establishment.
Sure.
But he decided to get in because he knows where the dead bodies are buried, how the nation, as he saw in his former country, South Africa, he said is the same corruption as here, and even is getting worse. So it is time, because I am passionate about this. I've seen the country has been destroyed. I've seen millions of lives suffered. We already got 1.7 million mortgage stress in this nation. People become slave for mortgage, up to 70% of their income going just to serve that parasite, which has been sucking the blood from everyone. So in this election, going to be a lot of candidates, some good intention, and on single issues.
Yeah.
Single issues is never going to work. There's 1,000 symptoms, but the disease is the banking system. One single policy, which is national bank, going to put the nation in the right direction in every field you think about it.
Yep. All right, two other things on the election before we move on. I'll come back to this fundraising event. So the 22nd of April, it's our campaign launch and fundraiser in Sydney. There's actually two events on the one day. There's a luncheon in Chatswood, which is a policy briefing. It's called the Cancel AUKUS Movement and Fundraiser, and you're welcome to come to that. And there's an event. The main fundraiser is at the Hilton Hotel on George Street on the evening of the 22nd. These are both on Tuesday, the 22nd of April. And I'm urging you to come, especially if you're within travelling distance of it, or even if you're interstate and you really want to participate in a major Citizens Party event, book your flights and come, right? So we'll put a link below to where you can find all the details. So there's a cover charge per head because it's a fundraiser, 120 for the luncheon and 150 for the evening. But there'll be things like auctions, etc. But you will get to meet the main Citizens Party's campaign team, the main candidates, including Andy Schmulow at this event, and you will be able to have real interactions with us as part of being able to have good drinks and all that.
It's not just that; it's a part of organic leadership. Every citizen got to take its responsibility when your nation is under attack. So every one of you is a leader. Leader doesn't mean some certificate, but when you have a passion to save your fellow human being, wherever they are, because we are here for whatever time and we're going to go. But what you've done in order that your kids, grandkids, even if you don't have kids, grandkids, for your citizens to have a dignity as a human being, not to be like a modern day slavery, I call it, what they did to us.
So help us make history.
Yep.
But this campaign's about making history. We've never done this kind of event before, so come along and help us make history. All right, one last thing, just quickly, because this is a theme we're going to stick to for the rest of the election campaign: how to vote. Start understanding how to vote. If you want to vote for the Citizens Party, you don't have to wait till election day. You could order now for a postal vote and vote for us in the Senate, and do it in a really clear way so you're confident that you're doing it right. Don't stuff it up, because there are rules of how to vote, and the Senate rules are a bit complicated. In the House, the green sheet, you got to number every box in order, of the order of your preference, not in actual order, the order of your preference. In the Senate, you don't have to number every box, but you got to number either 1 to 6 above the line or 1 to 12 below the line. And we're telling people to do 1 to 6 above the line, put number 1 in the box for Citizens Party, choose your other parties that you prefer. That's your choice. Don't even include the two major parties. Leave them completely out of your list. There'll be a lot more than 6 parties to vote for. Leave the major parties completely off. They don't deserve your vote at all.
No.
All you have to do is 1 to 6, right? But please get yourself educated, because one of the things that happens in Australia is a lot of votes get wasted because people haven't done it properly, right? Very important you stay on top of that. We'll help you all the way, and you can always contact us for more. Anyway,
And I think it's been done deliberate as well to confuse
Probably.
people. Yeah.
we will take up those causes going forward. But we're going to stop there because we're running out of time. We've got 2 more subjects to talk about, and this will be an ongoing theme for the rest of the election. Number 2, Albanese knows the truth about the Syria genocide. Now, we're going to keep this one fairly short, but I just wanted to do a quick update because last week I attended 2 vigils, Sleiman, for the of the Alawite community in Melbourne protesting the genocide, the slaughter.
And actually, there's not just Alawite. There's a lot of Christians from
Christians.
Syria in it, and Druze as well.
Yeah. Now you are an Iraqi Christian and a Syrian from just over the border, essentially. And so a lot of what I know about the Middle East is from Sleiman. So just describe briefly what you know is happening there in Syria now, because we warned all this would happen.
What's happening in Syria is exactly the same as they did to Iraq in the last 20 years. And if someone asking themselves, of course there are some fanatic, there are certain ideologies there, and I always tell people, don't look at the monastery, look at who's feeding the monastery.
Yeah.
You know, they did it to Europe for centuries. Used to be Protestant versus Catholic.
Yeah.
You know, civil war in the United States, assassination of Kennedy. So this is not just a Middle East, but Middle East is an important geography in the world because it's a crossroad between three continents. Asia, which is the bulk of population in the world, Europe, and then you've got Africa. And this is historically has been targeted, that region. By who? By the people who has got interest to control the world. They don't want any cooperation between the world, these three continents. So they're going to use every excuse. And Iraq is not, I mean, it's throughout history, as I mentioned, it's been targeted, that region. But Iraq is, they started seriously targeting Iraq since 1972, when the government of Iraq nationalized its oil.
Yep.
You know, 2/3 of the Iraqi oil was under the British Petroleum, and Saddam Hussein's party, they nationalized that. And Henry Kissinger, since then, went crazy. He said that nation got to be divided into 5 different Kurds, whatever, and Syria he mentioned, and Egypt and other. So this is a plan long time ago. So what we have then, you know, after they nationalized the oil, we had a Kurdish uprising. The Kurdish in northern Iraq was the job of Five Eyes in 1972, just exactly after that. And then we had Iran-Iraq War, 1980s. Then we have 1990, the invasion of Kuwait, which there is a reason, which is not, people doesn't know that. And then the invasion of Iraq based on lies in 2003. So what they did to Iraq, I can see exactly is the same, because Syria has got the same, bit of, you've got it's a multicultural ethnicity there. And the enemy love this kind of thing. They use every weakness in every culture, divide and conquer. So it is, when they invaded Iraq, actually going back to when the British invaded Iraq in 1916, during the First World War, and at that time, they were due to leave Iraq in 1932. This is League of Nations. They said, their term is finished. What we saw in 1933, there was a massacre. 3,000 Assyrian, because they're minority, were killed by Iraqi army, so-called, but this is under occupation of British. And then the British said, look, Iraq cannot govern itself. We've got to be here. So they extended their stay, looting oil, till 1958. And then, that was 1933. In 1941, there was something called Farhud, which was, again, the Jewish community, because we had a lot of Jewish community in Iraq, goes back to centuries. And that was to set up for pushing them to leave Iraq.
So it was like a pogrom against the Jewish community in 1941.
Yep. So they target always minority. And if you remember, in 2010, the cathedral in Baghdad, there were 6 so-called militants. They went in and they killed 58 worshippers. And then we saw the ISIS emerging, and that spilled into Syria, ISIS and Nusra. And when the ISIS and Nusra were in Syria, exactly, they kidnapped 2 bishops. They start targeting the Christian to justify what America and the British are doing there.
So now they're the government of Syria.
And they are on terrorist list, everyone. Yeah. Now we're going to maintain that chaos. And look at Israel, Netanyahu, what he's doing. Well, Bashar Assad gone. Why are they still attacking Syrian target inside Syria? So they brought those people to have that ability to divide and conquer.
Yeah, and so and specifically, Alawites, Christians, Druze as well are all getting killed
And Shia, there are certain Shia minority there as
by
well.
the governing power now in Syria that we all cheered in.
Yeah.
Not we, the Citizens
Yeah.
Party opposed it from the beginning, but our Western governments cheered those in. And I can tell you, Sleiman, I know that the Albanese government knows this because we put
100%.
out a release about this the other day. In 2013, Anthony Albanese attended, and we actually ran the clip of Anthony Albanese at this Alawite event in Sydney, saying that Syria is a secular democracy and Western and foreign forces should butt out. Right, it was a hands-off Syria event, and I know just recently the people in the government have said that they stuck with the line that Assad was bad, but they've acknowledged that what's replaced him is worse. And some of them said, "Oh, we'll just have to see how it goes." Well, now we can see how it's going. They're being slaughtered. And the fact that the government knows this, if this was a government that didn't know this and they were just either ignorant or in on it, I wouldn't hold out much hope. But the fact the government knows this means that they just have to be forced to do the right thing. So the Alawite community has put up a petition, a parliamentary petition. We'll put the link below. We put out a release about this yesterday. Please sign and share this petition and help them, because this is a petition that the government actually has to respond to. Because even things like, right now, they just need to be able to get family members visas so they can come to Australia. Because these people are going through absolute hell on earth.
And if you look at Saddam, well, there's no perfect government in the world. There's none. Saddam Hussein's time, it was secular, similar to Bashar al-Assad. They were a bit, tough in governing because the nature of society is different. You have to be, but what the media was telling people, human shredded machine, all that, there was all lies. I was there at the time. And what has been replaced Iraq and Syria today with? This is supposed to be bringing democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a total lie.
These were advanced countries, secular countries, not Islamist countries, secular countries, and we've turned the whole Middle East into a hellscape. All right, let's move on because we're definitely running out of time here, so I've got to do this quite fast. But this is essentially just a rant. Kiwis say to Aussies, "Chill, brew. It's just a ship." And I have been so enraged all week over this Chinese research ship and the reaction that it's received because it's sailing around Australia. And I've put up a bunch of TikToks about this. And if we have time, I might even get one. I might even play one. But I'm going to say essentially the same thing now. It turns out people should be. A month or so ago, there was some Chinese Navy ships entirely within international law, and our government had to admit, well, if we think we're in the right to do what we do up there in front of China, off the coast of China, then we can't really complain when China comes down here. And that was the right thing for our government to say, but I reckon they only said it because the election was on. And now this is completely different than that. This is a Chinese research ship that our media has called a spy ship. They've said it's aggressive. This is aggression. They've used the word aggression. They've used the word intimidation. What's the truth? This is a ship returning to China from 56 days in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, it worked with the equivalent of the CSIRO in New Zealand, called the National Institute for Atmospheric and Water Research, because it's the only ship in the world with the capabilities. It's got this little submersible to go down to the 10 kilometres in depth to check out this ocean trench that the New Zealand scientists wanted to check out. There were 7 other countries involved in this. I'll see if I can find it here. That Malaysia, Denmark, Germany, France, Brazil, and India were all involved in this joint exercise. 56 days, including there was about 10 days where they were in the bay, doing preparations in Wellington, right where the capital is, and they were there at New Zealand's invitation because that's what it is. It's a scientific research ship, and this ship has the only capabilities of its kind in the world. But as soon as it comes within cooey of Australia, cue the meltdown. And it's all the same people that were the people that were destroying our relationship with China in the lead up to COVID and during COVID, right? Exactly the same people, such as Peter Jennings, who was the boss of ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which was funded by the US government to trash Australia's relationship with our biggest and best trading partner, which they admitted later was because they needed to hype it up so that they could get us to be prepared to spend the $368 billion on AUKUS. You've got to have the fear to be able to justify that kind of spending, and the same people doing the same thing. But this time Peter Jennings is not just being a total hysteric, he's actually being an obnoxious turd, because the Kiwis are making us look silly. They're just doing business as usual with the Chinese, right? And it really is. Now, they're not saying it. I'm putting words in their mouth. But I can tell you, I called people in New Zealand, including associated with this scientific group. And they're not going to say anything publicly to embarrass Australia, but their private message is, relax, bro, it's just a ship. And that's all it is. And then the Chinese embassy, Sleiman, put out a statement yesterday. And they reveal in that statement, why is the ship going around Western Australia instead of going up past Queensland to get back to China? Well, because the weather in North Australia right now on the northeast coast is awful. They made a decision based on the weather. And if you actually look at a globe, don't just look at a flat map, look at a globe, it's not that far out of its way along the Great Circle route, right? This is just hysterical nonsense. But the people behind it think that you're a mug. And my question to my fellow Australians is, are you a mug? There's 1,000 comments on the Australian newspaper's article about today, and every one of those, my paraphrase of every one of those comments is, yeah, they're mugs. 1,000 people in the Australian today saying, I'm a mug. I'm buying into all this, and we saw this all before. But back to Peter Jennings. Because the Kiwis are making us look silly, he decided to attack them. He said yesterday, there are few creatures on earth more clueless than New Zealand scientists when it comes to defence and security. What a disgusting pig of a man. A disgusting pig. That little country to our east is making us look like babies compared to their hysteria, and so they've got to turn around and attack it. This is ridiculous, people. Do not fall for it. You were going to say?
What I want to say, I mean, think about it. This organisation, from day one, we were opposing the policies which has destroyed this nation, which is free trade, which made China, they decided in the West, we're going to just create bubbles to make money, forget about physical economy or production. So China, good on them, took over, and they think without what China is doing, there's no economy in the world. But why are you targeting China that much by the same lies as they did to Iraq and other places? Because China is going completely different direction to the financial empire system, which is collapsing. They want to grab your deposit. It's called bail-in. They are shutting down everything. So our nation in the Western world, as I see it coming from our side, is being already destroyed economically. How are you going to go back to machine tool again? It's going to take a lot of time. So China, we are not pro-Chinese government as some people, or pro-Saddam. We are pro-telling the truth. We tell the truth about China. Now, China raised, in the last 30 years, 700 million people out of poverty. We created millions of poor people in the Western world. This is a warfare against you, of course. And now China, I always tell our supporters, I said, China has got a different system of government. You cannot change their government, but you can change their policy every week if it doesn't work. This is why China become powerful. In the West, you can change the government every week, but you cannot change the policies. Well, this is financial dictatorship.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, very well said. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Maybe we'll put a link below where you can watch some of my TikToks, because I don't think we have time to squeeze it in. But anyway, that said, we've run out of time. So, running mate, Sleiman, thanks for joining us today. Thanks to the viewer.
And I just want to, the last comment, this election, we are not expecting hopefully we're gonna win few seats, but the winning is your impact. What impact you're gonna have on this, because no other political party talking about public bank other than this, and that's what we need.
If we get enough, even if we don't win seats, if we get enough votes that we get noticed, people in the banks, people in the leadership of the two major parties will get very, very nervous about why voters are turning to our party. And then they'll either start attacking us, which gives us more publicity, which is great, or they'll say, we better start adopting those policies. Your vote, therefore, is very powerful. It's not wasted. Get behind. This is the most serious election campaign we've ever run with the best candidates. You can help make that work. Thanks for tuning in, viewers. Tune in next week for more and stay abreast of what's happening in this election campaign.
Authorised by Robert Barwick, Citizens Party, Melbourne.